with Geosyntec Consultants, and Todd Hunsdorfer with King County, and Laura Nokes with the City of Tacoma. And with that, I believe, Christian, you are going to start us off with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we do start, sorry, I forgot to mention, my apologies, that if you do have questions, you can type them into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and I will be taking note of all the questions, and we'll have time at the end of the presentation where I will share the questions for our presenters to answer. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christian Nilsen. I'm a consultant with Geosyntec Consultants. With me on this presentation is Laura Nokes from City of Tacoma and Todd Hunsdorfer from King County. And we're going to present a series of projects today around the theme of collaborative watershed planning. The issue that we want to address is the issue of watershed planning in silos. And what I mean by this is there's a lot of great work being done by stormwater agencies. The city of Bothell, the presentation we were in before, was a great example of that. Really great watershed planning, really great thinking about it. But it seems to occur a little bit in isolation. And what we were going to present today is a better way of doing this. And we're going to tell a story about starting out with a regional data set that was developed by the Nature Conservancy. Some of you might have heard of the stormwater heat map for Puget Sound. This is a data set that covers all of Puget Sound, but it's a data set made for stormwater planning. And the idea is that different stormwater agencies can take this data and do planning within their agencies that's specific to their areas, but then also share and keep that open. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the development of the Puget Sound Stormwater Heat Map. And then Laura and Todd are going to talk about how they've applied this to their particular jurisdictions. The Stormwater Heat Map started in about 2018. It was developed by the Nature Conservancy, and it covers all of Puget Sound, like I said. And the idea behind it is to get the best science and the best tools in the hands of decision makers, and to really lower the cost for effective decision-making around stormwater planning, with the ultimate goal of improving stormwater quality in Puget Sound. They saw kind of this siloed planning, and they wanted to try to help in a way that they could, and to really get the best data out there so that less time and less effort was spent on developing data sets, and more time can be focused on actually implementing stormwater projects. So the project is still in development. We're releasing some data layers now, and Todd and Laura will talk about how they've integrated this into their stormwater planning. These data sets were developed for stormwater planners in mind. So we have data sets related to land cover, imperviousness, land use, age of development, soils, topography, everything that you would typically use in watershed modeling or a watershed plan. We're also developing layers for pollutant loading. These are being finalized now, and these will be released soon. We're going to have these Puget Sound-wide spatial data sets for metals, TSS, nutrients, and total pHs as well. I don't have a lot of time to go into the development of each of these layers, so I'm just going to give one example of how we developed this land cover classification data set. We started out with high quality aerial imagery. We took training data from different sources, like the National Land Cover Database that was at a coarser scale. We used some machine learning approaches to develop these downscaled land cover layers, and these are done at about a 1 meter squared resolution. And these have been tested and verified against other data sets as well. And so what that gives you is the ability to do analysis really at any scale. So here's a screenshot from the stormwater heat map that shows the resolution of this data set. It's pretty high quality, and it's available for any area. And what this does is it allows you to scale your data for any application. And this picture on the left here, this is showing the pixel resolution of this data. This is one of our pollutant loading layers. So at such a low resolution, the benefit of this is that you can aggregate it for any sort of application. You can do it for the catchment scale. You can do it for, in this example, census block scale. And it's really an adaptive platform for developing these. There are other layers as well. Some of our spatial layers are on the left here: imperviousness, land cover, land use, soils, age of development, slope, traffic, tree cover. We have hydrology and climate change data, and then, like I mentioned, our pollutant loading data sets as well. There's a technical reference document if you're interested to see more of the details of how these have been developed. And there's a link here that we can make sure that we share. It's also gone through a pretty rigorous science review. And once we address all the comments from the science review panel, then this data will be released, be launched for everyone to be able to use. And it's also available for any application too. So it's open source from the beginning. There are permissions. You can adapt these data for commercial use. You can distribute it. You can modify it however you want. And so really the idea behind getting these tools out there into the environment and trying to develop this common platform is really to develop kind of a regional approach and a regional, what we're calling an innovation ecosystem, where these data layers are available. They can be added to, they can be improved, they can be adapted for whatever approach. And what Todd and Laura are going to talk about are how they've applied them to their jurisdictions. And then I think it'd be great if we could also think about what comes next and how we can build this regional approach to have a common platform and to prevent a lot of duplication and planning in silos. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd now, and he's going to talk about the Our Green Duwamish project and how they've adapted that.
Thanks, Christian. And so, I'm planning to go into a little bit more depth on this particular initiative, Our Green Duwamish, later today at 11:35. But I want to just help set the context here, and really quickly, I know these presentations are relatively short. We've been at it for a long time. We started in 2014 and formed groups in 2015. We took a collaborative approach to restoring environmental and economic health, and have since been working towards completing our implementation plan, which was published at the end of 2020. So with the next click, you can see some of the folks who are involved in the process. This is a watershed-wide stormwater management effort. And we, on the next slide, Christian, we had the opportunity here to come up with a sort of a regional attempt at creating this mapping tool. And the process came about pretty organically. We started conversations in 2018, and originally the plan was to find a way to measure our progress towards the 7 goals outlined in our strategy. This was further made. There was a great opportunity there with the issuance of the draft phase 2 NPDES SMAP requirements, and it really allowed us to sort of position ourselves to help our partners meet upcoming obligations. So we created a mapping subgroup of the larger partnership, and it sort of operated as a technical advisory group when further developing the mapping tool. And on the next slide here, you can see that we have a few target outcomes. First, Quick plug for Lisa Parsons. Her website here is at the bottom. She has some awesome photography of the Green River, and it looks like a totally different place than the lower Green River that I'm familiar with. Effectively, we were creating this mapping tool. We had a few targets in mind. You know, creating this common language was really important. We have heard from our partners the value of maintaining autonomy in their decision making, and yet we're walking this tightrope between working towards the benefits of the watershed and allowing individual organizations to make decisions. And so as we've been wrestling with that process, it was helping to define the mapping tool that we have created. So if you're tracking with the permit language, you know, this might be a reference slide for later, but the green elements are the ones we're working to help phase 2 communities meet. We are not helping to address the ones in the red box. And then Laura's gonna jump in here a little bit later to talk about the ways in which Tacoma's working to help advance the permit requirements in the yellow box. And then to jump into the details, we're working on adopting this common platform, building off the TNC stormwater heat map like Christian mentioned. And on the next slide, you can see that there's this is the watershed itself. You'll recognize we have, there's 14 phase 2 cities. The boundary is quite a bit larger than the watershed boundary. This was designed to be inclusive of the entirety of every jurisdiction within the watershed, regardless of whether portions of that city drain to the Green Duwamish or not. And this was done to align with the permit requirements and avoid any sort of limitation to the tool. On the next slide, we have a workflow here that we've identified. This is, you know, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but it was effectively designed using Ecology's SMAP guidance document. And we've highlighted a few major deliverables and some spatial layers here used in the tool. You can see the process moves from left to right. I want to show a few static screenshots of what the tool looks like, and we're calling it the SMapper. This is our home screen, our splash screen, and we're calling it the SMapper. It's written in our code, and when the beta tool is complete, we'll be making that code available to anyone who wants it. It's all open source. And one of the characteristics that I was really excited to hear about from the Bothell tool in the previous presentation, if any of you were able to make it to that. You can see that the one of the features the tool offers is this ability to clip the drainage basins to your city boundary. You know, working in the watershed, I think there was a sort of this embedded effort to promote cross-jurisdictional partnerships, and so the tool is really designed to see which basins are wholly within the jurisdiction or partially, and promote the partnerships that might exist when trying to tackle a basin that is in more need than another. So on the next screen, here's a quick map of watersheds in Covington with the tree canopy layer and a chart showing the relative tree cover by watershed. Christian mentioned there's a number of data layers. It's not just limited to tree canopy. And all of these reports here are available for download to PDF and can be supporting documentation for SMAP, meeting SMAP requirements. We've included impairments. Here's another map of Auburn, again with the watersheds clipped to the city boundary and a summary chart of impairments on the right. It's all expandable. The watersheds can be renamed. The views allow individual users to create the required watershed inventory report that's articulated in the permit. And all maps and tables and charts can be exported, as I mentioned, and included with a narrative to explain current conditions within the jurisdiction. So then next up is the watershed prioritization step, specifically the decision support framework. And on the next page, there's an image here of how the prioritization and decision support framework functions. The window allows users to analyze and compare watersheds using customizable weighting and priority characteristics. So the tool scores the watersheds, it generates a list of basins in priority order based on individual characteristics, but it doesn't identify a singular location where work needs to be done, and the tool doesn't generate an automatic submittal to ecology. It still requires an effort on the user's part to explain how everything was weighted and prioritized, but that is supported by all of this backup documentation that's generated by the tool. So that's a brief overview. Hopefully you can make it to our Green Duwamish presentation later today. I'll hand it over to Laura. Thanks.
Thanks, Todd. Good morning. Like Christian said, I'm Laura Nokes. I'm part of the Watershed Planning Group with the City of Tacoma. And today I'm going to be telling you about our new watershed planning tool that we're just in the process of developing, and how that tool is going to kind of build upon what Christian and Todd just talked about. And then last year, we received grant funding from Ecology for this watershed planning project, and the city partnered with Geosyntec to develop that. Really because of their past and current collaborations, and because we're building on an existing pollutant heat map, and then the work that ODD has done as well, it's really allowed us to go farther with our development, and I think more broadly. And also because we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, it's really a smarter use of our limited grant dollars. Okay, next slide, Christian. All right, so where did this start? So a few years ago, the city recognized that we needed to be more strategic in how we were making our stormwater management decisions, and really wanted to make sure that we were being transparent with how those decisions were being made. So we started development on our new watershed management plan, and the tool that I'm going to be talking about is really a big part of that, and where we're hoping to go. Go back one more slide. I'm not quite done. Thanks. So what we want to do, what we wanted to get out of it, is how can we prioritize our actions to get the biggest value for our stormwater investments? How can we quantify those benefits of the actions and then communicate that to our stakeholders? We wanted to make sure that, wherever possible, that we're targeting projects that provide multiple benefits. We want to make sure that we're providing equitable service delivery across the city, and then, where possible, integrating and aligning those goals with our regional partners. Okay, next slide, thanks. So again, like I mentioned earlier, we received this grant funding from Ecology, and similar to both Todd and Christian's projects, this is going to be an open source framework so that others can hopefully take what we've developed, use it, adapt it, and hopefully make it better sometime in the future. So the goals of our project were to develop this spatial tool that's going to identify and prioritize stormwater management actions in Tacoma. We knew we wanted to incorporate receiving water conditions and other community concerns. So what are our communities most concerned about in terms of watershed health? And then is also really apply this equity lens with how we're making decisions on what projects are going to move forward. So ultimately, we want a tool at the end of the day that's going to allow decision makers to make the most effective stormwater management actions in locations where they're most needed. All right, so before I go into the details on this, I'm just going to mention that we're still in the development phase of our project, so kind of the opposite end of where Todd is at. So this is just a really high-level overview of how we're planning to adapt the heat map tool. So more details in the future. But the first addition to that base heat map tool that Christian was talking about is this BMP performance module. So this is once we've identified where our pollutant hotspot areas are, we want to know, so we know what areas we want to target for improvements. Now, what's going to be the most effective BMP for removing pollutants in that area? Next is the BMP tracking module, and this hopefully is going to allow us to track the changes and the benefits of our actions over time. So we really want to evaluate and provide recommendations based on actual conditions. So if we're adding regional treatment or green infrastructure, how is this changing that pollutant landscape and ultimately our priority list? Okay, next is going to be looking at cost versus thanks, Christian. Cost versus benefit. And simply put, we just want to know what's the most cost-effective strategies to reducing stormwater pollutant loading to that specific area. And then all of that is going to kind of feed into this decision support framework. And this is where that ranking and scoring basin is going to happen to come up with our prioritized action plan. This one will be using input from the OGD project that Todd just talked about. We're constructing a similar framework to them. And this is also where that community feedback and needs assessment is going to tie in. So like I mentioned, we're still in the development phase, but some outputs we're hoping to get from the tool are a map showing Tacoma's prioritized areas that are most in need of the stormwater improvements, and then also really the ability to be transparent with how that information or criteria, what information went into those decisions. We want a prioritized list of stormwater projects and actions to address those concerns, and we want to have the confidence that we're really getting the best value for our investments. We also want the ability to conduct the adaptive management and track the benefits of those actions over time. And we really want to make sure that we're incorporating the community needs and concerns into our decision-making process. Okay, next slide. So to summarize, so what's next? I think we can all agree that we're required to do a lot of things for stormwater management. And I think at the end of the day, we just all want to make sure that the things that we're doing have the biggest impact to help us meet those stormwater management goals. And I think that's what we're really hoping that these tools that we're developing are going to do for us and others. Well, the tool I just talked about is going to come up with that list of prioritized actions for Tacoma, and Todd's tool is doing that for King County. We still need to answer that question of how this is helping meet those larger watershed, regional Puget Sound wide goals. How do we merge all of the good data, good work that we're all doing? And, there is a lot of great projects happening, a lot we're hearing from today, and then really evaluate that collective or holistic regional benefit. I think, that we're hopeful with the continued collaborations like these that we're working on. We're working kind of towards developing that regional method of understanding that Todd was talking about. So at the end of the day, we can be confident that we're targeting areas that are really most in need of water quality improvement, and also find those opportunities to collaborate across those jurisdictional boundaries, recognizing that we are not in the silo that Christian said, we're kind of part of this, larger regional area. And also I think, and this is a good kind of outcome of Todd's project, is working with those other agencies that might have less resources to devote to that work. So with that, I don't know, Todd, Christian, do you guys have any last thoughts? But we think we might be ready for questions.
Thank you, all of you, for the very informative presentations. We have plenty of time now for questions. If anyone wants to type questions into the chat box, which is down at the bottom center of your screen, I'd be happy to share those questions with our presenters. In the meantime, while we're waiting for folks to type in some questions, perhaps you could share with us how folks, question I have here is, how could people get involved in this process?
Probably the best way to stay informed is to sign up for the TNC Stormwater Heat Map Google group. It's down, the link is down there on the bottom, and we can see about sending that out. But we don't send out a lot of emails. We're not going to blast you with a lot of spam, but it's a way to stay updated on the development of the tool. And if you want to get the data there, we have a GitHub site where you can download any of the code that's been developed so far. And if you sign up for that link, you'll be able to access the GitHub repository as well.
Wonderful. Do you see these types of tools being worthwhile for smaller scale management tools? Not sure how small, it just says smaller scale.
Yeah, definitely the data sets have been created with that in mind. Like I said, the land use or the land cover data set is about a 1 meter squared resolution. So you can aggregate that however you want. For OGD, we aggregated those data to the Puget Sound assessment units, the watershed characterization assessment units. And you can really aggregate it for whatever boundary is applicable.
I want to point out that the TNC Stormwater heat map link is in our chat box right now, so that folks can copy that link if they'd like, that rather than having to write that all down from your slide. And so if they go to this link, then is that the way they could find out how they could implement the approach to their own locations, or is there other ways that they could find out information about how to implement one of these approaches to their locations?
Yeah, that's the best way to get access to the data itself. And the data is not the tool. Where the tools are really useful is things like what Todd talked about. That's still in development, but when that's available, Todd, I don't know if you want to talk about how to get involved in finding out more about the OGD tool.
Yeah, sure. You can just contact me directly. Is the best way to do it. I see a number of people in this presentation who are also partners in the Our Green Duwamish initiative. And so that's exciting to see. And I just wanted to thank them for all of their efforts in helping to create this as well.
We have 2 minutes left. So is there anyone else who has another brief question that we can ask our presenters? And otherwise, I do want to remind folks, I think, Todd, you said you have a presentation. You'll go in a little bit more on the Our Green Duwamish. When is that presentation?
That's at 11:35.
Okay. Oh, let's see, looks like we have another question here. Do you think the current siloed stormwater management approach is a result of cities' permits or the limits of each city's authority?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that in 30 seconds, but
I think the answer is yes. Frankly, when the phase 2 draft language was issued, you'll recall the original language, and I see a few people here from ecology, but you'll recall the original language didn't include any acknowledgement of achieving those obligations with a watershed-based approach, and that changed through the course of redrafting the language. And I want to thank ecology for that effort, because if we're only focused on managing stormwater within our jurisdictions, we could be doing all the best things that based on the resources we have, but not making the difference that we need to make. And so, focusing on managing stormwater at a regional watershed-based level, I think will give us the best chance of success. And so, it is related to the limits of each city's authority, but there's an opportunity here to go beyond that and work together on achieving a common outcome.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Laura, Todd, and Christian for your wonderful, very informative presentations today. Folks, if you have additional questions, their email addresses are here on this slide. You can follow up directly with them with any additional questions. And again, that link for the TNC Stormwater Heat Map is in the chat box. We are out of time, so thank you all. We hope you enjoy all the sessions that you're going to attend in Municon this year.